not oxidized, and as the other components are too. Just showing that once it's in this form, it's stabilized and not as a reactive. So it wouldn't turn into pyroglutamic acid and ammonia. So you would smell that and you would taste it as well. So it's a tasteless aqueous formulation. And these are just more evidence of what happens. I don't want to get into much detail. I'm taking a lot of time already. Uptake and transport. I already told you the story of how B12 is done, and then what Comax does is short circuit that whole sequence of events of all those proteins and goes directly, even doesn't have to take a ride onto the transcobalamin 2 and can be uptaked into the cells and even nerve cells. So this is just sort of saying that same thing. So let's see what the effects were. We did a study. Okay, I had about 24 people with HIV. Just about all of them were taking drugs, and this was maybe 12 years ago, 13 years ago. And I would come down. They would meet at a certain place every couple of weeks, and I would come down. I signed them up. A friend introduced me, and I said, what I wanted to do would take a survey of their symptoms. I want to give them this B12. It's harmless, and I think it's going to be very good for you. And I would appreciate it if you would take, a couple of squeezes a day for the next 6 weeks, and then fill out the form again. And slowly I got them. I just went, and they're very nice, and you wouldn't know that they had, until you read their symptoms, you wouldn't know that they were sick, for the most part. And at the end, basically, each of them you found out had about a dozen symptoms of out of maybe 30, and they were pretty severe. They couldn't sleep, they had night sweats, they couldn't think right, they couldn't remember, they couldn't, numbness in the hands and feet. They had stomach and gastrointestinal problems. They had skin problems, neuromuscular problems. They were depressed. They were, when you read them, it was like I wanted to cry, which I often did, and they wouldn't even know that, And they would come back, hey, this is good stuff, And then someone else, a few others would sign up, and I spent, the whole spring doing that, and then we got the results and found out that half of all the symptoms, about half of them disappeared, and an additional 25% improved. So total improvement or disappearing was 75-80%. Across the board in all different types of symptoms. Visual, they have problems with their vision as well. And here, what do you see? Candidiasis, infection, depression, impairment, fatigue, cognitive, all of these, dry mouth. And a lot of the symptoms were from the drugs they were on. But I think the same symptoms are the symptoms of the side effects of many of the drugs. Especially, what was that first drug? AZT. That was killing as many people as the HIV was. Because once you got on these drugs, sometimes you just died. And I know people who cleaned up their act and took care of themselves and whatnot and survived. And all their friends that took the drugs at the early part, not the combined ones, but in the 80s, they all died. So it was a hard thing to see, but I was very grateful to see what happened. So any other studies we, in progress, but also I'm doing diabetic neuropathy. It never ends, but in diabetic neuropathy has very similar numbness and symptoms as the HIV related. And in a matter of days sometimes, the pain and numbness and tingling would disappear. I just wanted to emphasize mostly on the B12 and its applications in AIDS, and in this case diabetic neuropathy. Well, Max, thank you for your attention. Any questions? Put a picture of B12. Yes.
I have two questions. The first one is I've been to the pharmacy lately and I saw like bottles of B12.
Yeah.
Like that they sell, and most of these are like 700 milligrams. And you mentioned that earlier that you only need like a few micrograms. So is it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm surprised if it is. If it's saying 700 milligrams.
Or like, I'm guessing it's like 200 to 700 somewhere between that.
Yeah, you mean normally there's a lot that are 100 micrograms, you know, and that's that 1% of that will get through. So 10 micrograms. So that's what they find. But it's no guarantee once that's in the blood that it would be taken up into the cells.
Did you have too much B12?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the few things that are basically harmless. We studied its toxicology by doing administration of 1 million times the normal dose in a rat's tail, 10 rats, and 10 controls, and that's about as much as what would kill them is how much volume. You can't give them like a milliliter. You know, in the highest concentration we gave it to them, and watched them for a month, and they were as happy as the controls, if not happier. And then when they dissected them, histology, everything was normal. So it's basically harmless.
And my second question was, once the Comax is into the cells, or how do you get rid of the glutamine and glycine?
It'll dissociate. I mean, if you know, nature's funny. You have something like that in the when we have it in the solution, everything is in equilibrium. And then when it gets dissipated throughout the system, it's still intact because of the hydrogen bonding. Inside, more competitive hydrogen bonding would slowly release the amino acids, which probably would have some functions as well. And what we think is that this form of Covamax probably, that's something we would like to pursue, may be a storage form in the liver, because there are stores of it in the liver. And then how does it get mobilized? The way in which you find that the most accurate way of finding if you're deficient in B12 is to examine what levels of the transcobalamin 2 with the B12 is. When they start to decrease, it's called hollow transcobalamin 2, which means it has the B12. When those levels, that's the first cue of that B12 is deficient, when they are decreased. And then when you see neurological symptoms, it's already, you've been deficient for quite a while. So it's something that's becoming a more standard test, although not used widely enough by any means. Yes?
Is vitamin B12 fat soluble vitamin or water soluble?
It's water soluble. Yeah, and this whole thing is water soluble. And it's tasteless and, do I have some? It's off the shelf right here. And just, this is 2 grams, 8 milliliters. Just trying to get a dose. This would be the dose, about 6 drops. 5.5. And this would last a month or so, but it's, whoever I give it to, they say, it's good. You know, they don't have to have any problems. It's sort of like a good cup of coffee that lasts all day without the headache. Yes?